What makes you think if Jesus was setting boundaries through his ministry, what makes you think you don't have to do that too? Hey everybody, how's it going? Are you feeling good? Are you feeling nice? Welcome back to another Bible Talk with your girly pop, Aaliyah Renee. I'm so excited to bring you this one. Before we get started, I just ask that the Lord would give you a revelation from this video. I pray that everyone who watches this video is blessed and is encouraged to remind themselves of their self-worth and to learn to protect their self-worth, because even Jesus set boundaries. Let's talk about it. I'm going to start by asking you two questions, okay? The first question is, I want you to really think about this. When is the last time you did something for someone that you didn't want to do? Whether that be like your mom, your friends, they're like, hey, can you pick me up? I'm feeling really, really sick and I need someone to drive me somewhere. And you know it's 45 minutes just to get to them. And you know it's another 45 minutes to drop them off, but you still do it. It's a Friday. Maybe you wanted to relax and stay in, but you still do it. You just help them out. And the second question I want to ask you is, when is the last time you said no to doing something to put yourself first? See, there's like two sides of the coin there. One being, how often do you feel like you sacrifice your own feelings and motives to help others? And the other side of the coin being, how often do you put aside what others may think to put yourself first? I think that's something that I dealt with a lot in my teenage years. I'm only 23, but I feel like my life has been full of situations where I have not set boundaries. So what are boundaries? You know this already. I'm a definitions girl. So let's pull up the definition of boundaries. A boundary, in the most literal sense, is a line that marks the limits of an area. It's a dividing line, a limit of a subject or sphere of activity. Something that literally says, go this far and no more. Other definitions call boundaries limits to what someone considers to be acceptable behaviors. And that's definitely the more interpersonal lens and not the literal lens that we talk about when we talk about like countries having borders and boundaries. But if you think about a country and the borders and boundaries, those are kind of serious. Like in order for you to cross a border or boundary, like if I wanted to go back to Canada to visit my family while I'm staying in the States right now, I would have to cross a specific boundary known as the US and Canada border. And to do that, I can't just walk across. I actually have to gain permission from people who are in charge, more specifically border patrol officers, in order to let me go across those boundaries that have been set. So if we see that the definition of boundaries are so serious everywhere else, why then do we not also have that strict of a regulation when it comes to our boundaries with other people? Genuine question. Going throughout life, I always thought boundaries were meant for bad people. I always thought that only when you are hurt by someone, you should set a boundary and be like, oh, you did bad to me, so now I need to set these boundaries with you. And that is the only time when boundaries came up in my life. Like boundaries equaled punishment for someone who did me wrong. But then in reality, I started to think about all of my relationships and found that the best answer to the question of who to set boundaries with is to set boundaries with everyone. In actuality, every relationship calls for some sort of boundaries, regardless of who the person is or what the situation is, whether that be your mom, your dad, your boss, your job, regardless. Every single scenario, situation, interpersonal relationship should have boundaries that you set for that person and that person sets for them. Let me give you an example of how I found setting boundaries to even the most unproblematic and amazing people tends to save you resentment and strife along the way. So I have this friend that's super funny. You know, we had just met initially and they really wanted to FaceTime like all the time. They wanted to chat, they wanted to have a good time. And at first I'm like, oh my gosh, this is sort of like the only way that we can connect since we're not living close together. So let me FaceTime them. But the problem was, because of our busy schedules, we could only really FaceTime at like 9 p.m. And if you don't know this about me, I'm really a morning person. I love my mornings. I wake up at like 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. So going with periods of staying up really late, sometimes back to back with a friend, although the times were amazing, left me waking up really tired and cranky. And subconsciously, I started to resent the friend because I felt like I was obligated to be on these calls with them. Thus, I would stay up late and wake up really not refreshed and not feeling it. But I think that is genuinely the perfect time to set a boundary, even in a relationship where you feel like you're not being like detrimentally hurt or someone is doing you totally wrong. Even in a friendly relationship of someone you just met who may have a different sleeping schedule or different views on things than you, it helps to set boundaries early. And that's exactly what I did when I started to realize that I was losing sleep. I literally hit them up and I was like, listen, I love talking to you. You're my favorite person in the whole entire world, but I cannot stay up from like 9 to 12 talking to you because I get up at 6. And you know what happened when I set a boundary? You know what happened when I put myself first? Absolutely nothing, because they were like, oh, okay, absolutely no worries. We don't have to stay up that late. And what we decided to do was just text a little bit more, do some spontaneous voice memos or FaceTimes throughout the day a little bit earlier. And shocker, we are still very much good friends and we talk very frequently, probably more than we did when we were talking late at night. And I sleep well, they sleep well, we're all happy. See, in that situation, a boundary saved me from getting really mad at someone who really didn't know what they were doing wrong. In situations where relationships seem to be going well, but there seems to be things budding, like unintentionally, just two people being different people interacting with each other is bound to cause a little bit of friction at some point in the relationship. And that has happened to even the bestest of my friends. In those moments, it's important to set your expectations and boundaries when things are good. Now, I think we've all sort of gone through situations of maybe having someone who does a really bad job and also shows time and time again that they don't respect you. That's also a really great time to set some boundaries. When you see that the person you're interacting with or friends with, have a relationship with, doesn't seem to have your best interests at heart, whether that be intentionally and they're really being malicious about it, or unintentionally where people just have things going on and maybe you're not a primary thought on their mind. Matthew 7 verse 15 to 20 says, "Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Even so, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a bad tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Therefore, by their fruits you will know them." Here, we see Jesus speaking, and he is a G. He sets boundaries like a boss. The main thing I want you to recognize is that Jesus lets us know that no matter who we are around, we will know who they are, what their intentions are about us, if they care about us, and how exactly we need to set boundaries by their fruits. And fruits is just a way of saying their actions. What is the seed inside their heart? And from there, that seed will produce fruit that we'll see throughout their actions. Regardless of the words that people speak to each other, the actions are really a nice and clear indicator of their instincts. And I think it's really simple to understand if a person is for you or not. A person that cares about you will consistently do things or bear fruit that show that they care about you. Whereas a person who does not have your best interests at heart, or someone that you may need to especially set boundaries for, are people who consistently don't act in ways that have your best interests at heart. They're bearing bad fruit. And speaking of Jesus, since I love how we talked about this in Matthew 7, talking about how we can read people and determine how to set boundaries with others and who we need to especially set very specific boundaries with, Jesus was the best example in the Bible of setting boundaries. Although Jesus healed people, taught people, saved people, etc. through his 3 years of ministry, he never got burnt out by it and he never had adverse reactions because he set boundaries for rest and personal time. That was one of the biggest things that Jesus does, and his disciples write about it in the gospel. Luke chapter 5 verse 15 to 16 says, "Yet the news about him spread all the more, so that crowds of people came to hear him," talking about Jesus, "and to be healed of their sicknesses. But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed." So as we can see, although he was doing all of the wonderful things that he needed to do throughout his 3-year ministry as he was preaching the good news of his coming, he still set boundaries as the savior of the world to say, you know what? No, I'm going to go to the other side of the mountain. I'm not interested in preaching to the multitudes right now. I need some me time where I can spend time with the Lord and pray. And this is so profound to me when I think about it in the sense of a ministry that people do and why it's so important to set boundaries when you are doing ministry or you're creative or you're serving God, because some of us are beginning to resent the gifts that the Lord has given us because we don't learn how to set healthy boundaries. You don't need to be serving every single Sunday. You can take moments of rest for yourself to be poured in. And this is something that I need to teach myself because I love serving. Every Sunday I'm at my church at 6 o'clock in the morning setting up for service. But I have found that there are times where I feel exhausted, and I think that exhaustion then leads to me being more irritable or not on my game or almost even resenting the service that I do. And God never wants us to do something with a unpure or bad heart posture, which is why it's important for us to do just as Jesus did. Although Jesus had the most important job, more important than any sermon you will preach or any video camera you'll set up or any song you'll sing, his ministry was literally the apex of all ministries, and he still found time to rest and take time for himself and be downloaded in by the Abba Father. So what makes you think if Jesus was setting boundaries through his ministry, what makes you think you don't have to do that too? I get it, we all have zeal and passion to serve the Lord, but that zeal and passion has to be fueled by us plugging back into the Lord and stepping away from the stage sometimes so we can be filled. All in all, I feel like sometimes we can lose the spark for our destinies, our ministries, our families, because we have this inability to be good stewards of ourselves through setting boundaries and having time and respect for yourselves. And because of this, we cannot be good stewards of others. Jesus was also a G because he recognized something that sometimes stops us from setting boundaries in the first place. When I was setting boundaries, I believe the hardest part for me was like, oh my gosh, if I do this, people are going to hate me because I'm saying no to them. But Jesus recognized no matter how open you are, no matter how much of a yes man you are, no matter how much you compromise your morals or your boundaries for someone, it is in human nature to just be flip-flopping. And honestly, it's true because the same people that I would bend over backwards for, compromise my morals for, would just take it all, not say thank you, and then honestly just change just like that. And I gained nothing, but was also so broken because I had compromised so much and not set boundaries leading up to that point. And we see this with Jesus in John chapter 2, verse 23 to 24. Now, when Jesus was in Jerusalem at Passover during the feast, many believed in his name when they saw the signs which he did. But Jesus did not commit himself to them, or he just didn't trust them, because he knew all men and had no need that anyone should testify of him. So he basically said that he didn't need their approval, for he knew what was in man. And what is in man is this flip-flopping nature that makes us inherently selfish. Jesus, being all-knowing, recognized that bending over backwards for people would not be fruitful. Dropping his boundaries or serving a little extra for the multitudes and not taking time for himself was not going to make them like him anymore, or stop them from literally saying crucify him just a couple months later. So if we can see that through Jesus's example, the approval of people are fleeting, why are we so scared of the approval of people that we don't set boundaries for ourselves, when in reality, 6 months from now, we don't even know if we're gonna be friends with them? And it's funny because the people I tried to please the most and those who I didn't set boundaries with the most were the first relationships to go. Because what we need to understand is when we set boundaries, we also demand respect in the dynamic of the relationships that we have, which is something that everyone should strive for. It's important to note that not setting boundaries really only hurts you. In the time that you waited for that person to acknowledge what you're doing, you could have already mustered up the courage to set boundaries for yourself and actually treat yourself like you care about yourself. Don't be walked all over. Jesus was not walked all over. God was not walked all over. Since the Garden of Eden, he set boundaries saying, do not eat that tree. And when those boundaries were crossed, he dropped us. He set a boundary. They crossed the boundary and they were out of the Garden of Eden. So when your boundaries are being broken consistently by people, it's also time for you to learn to retract your attention, your time from those people as consequence to your boundaries not being respected. And the only way that you will be strong enough to set boundaries is if you respect yourself enough to know that you do not want to be walked all over. And also, when you set those boundaries, make sure that you do not go back on them. This is not only for the benefit of yourself, because why are we being wishy-washy, but it also helps with other people. When you set a boundary and you say, no, when we go out, I'm not gonna drink. But then every Tuesday, like if they ask you 3 times, like you will drink, that is not a boundary. That's like a little piece of paper with holes in it, and things can easily just come right through. A boundary means let your yes be yes and let your no be no, like it says in Matthew 5 verse 37. And all in all, I'm just going to leave you with Proverbs 4 verse 23, which says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. If you want to guard your heart, your mind, your peace, your sanity, especially when it comes to meeting new people, whether this be a romantic relationship, a marriage, your parents, your boss, whether that be the relationship with the ministry that you do in church or where you serve, you need to set boundaries. If things are complex, you don't know where to start, you don't have the courage, the best way to conquer these things is to simply ask God. So let me know what you think about this Bible Talk episode in the comments down below. Have you ever had to set a boundary? Are you trying to set boundaries now? What scriptures or examples from the Bible did I miss? What are some ways that we can set boundaries with the dynamics and relationships that are in our lives? If you've watched this far and you're not already subscribed, please make sure to subscribe because I do these Bible Talks every single Sunday. And I would also appreciate if you give this video a like to show YouTube that this is actually a cool video that more people need to see. Thank you so much for watching to the end. I'm so excited to read what y'all have to say in the comments, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.